being here. As a former party chairman myself, I always had that cringe right before the meeting started that nobody was going to show up and you'd be there all by yourself. So I appreciate all of you guys being there. There's a lot of things you could be doing tonight, but you're here to listen to a guy like me who wants to lead this state, and I appreciate that, and that's very important. As Bethany mentioned, I'm a state representative now, and I've been active in the Republican Party for 20 years. I got started as a precinct captain back in 1997, and if y'all remember back in those days, it was hard to get people to show up at a Republican convention. So I had a coworker who was active in the GOP, and he showed up at work one day and said, "Oh, by the way, you're a delegate to the state convention." I said, "Oh, wow, what's that?" I didn't even know what a state convention was. So I showed up at the 1997 state convention, which I think was in Macon. But anyway, had a good time and thought, wow, this is kind of fun. So I got involved in the Republican Party, worked my way up, and from 2002 to 2005, I was chairman of the Gwinnett Republican Party. And if y'all remember, those were exciting times. We were, we were kind of flipping the state from a blue state to a red state. And Sonny Perdue became our first Republican governor since Reconstruction, and Saxby Chambliss was only our second U.S. senator that had ever been elected as a Republican, Mac Manningley being the other one. So those were really exciting times back then, and it's kind of ironic, here we are 15 years later, and we kind of, I don't know about y'all, but kind of feel like we're in the fight of our lives. These election results Tuesday night were a little scary. Democrats winning special elections in seats that Republicans had held, and frankly, the Republicans probably should have won. I'm not trying to disparage any candidates, but I think what we face now is what I took from Tuesday. We have a united and energized Democratic Party, and they're united around really one goal, and that's that every Republican they can defeat. They're doing that because that furthers their goal to stop President Trump. So even winning a special election in Athens, Georgia, on a rainy Tuesday, in their mind, furthers their goal of blocking President Trump. And so I think what the challenge for us going into next year, how are we going to respond to that? Because unfortunately, I look at the Republican Party. We're not really energized. We're not really united. We're kind of pulling in different directions, and we've got never Trumpers, and we've got pro-Trumper, always Trumpers, and we've got I don't know Trumpers, and we've got kind of the whole gamut here, neocons and rhinos and libertarians and conservatarian. We got this whole gamut of people, and what are we going to unite around? What are we going to unite around to focus on and present to the American people for next year? And I think that's what we're going to have to grapple with over the next couple months here. What is it that we stand for? What do we want to do? And I think the president has laid out a number of important things that he wants to work on. The Congress has some important things they want to work on. We were riding down here, excuse me, and as I was riding to pick up Jonathan, I was listening a little bit to Sean Hannity, and we've got this tax bill moving forward. I think there's some good things in that, and there's some bad things. There's some things I don't really like in that. But look, they're moving forward with it. The Senate and the House today both took important steps to move that forward to where we can reform and cut taxes for folks. And I think that would be a wonderful thing if they can get that accomplished. That would be I think could kind of break the dam. We've kind of had this logjam in Congress there where they've been arguing and fighting over stuff and come up. Not quite accomplish some of the goals we wanted them to accomplish, but if they can get a tax reform bill and we can show the American people, all right, we cut your taxes, the economy is doing well, the stock market is booming, jobs are being created, and that's to me that lifts a lot of spirits. And so I hope that they can. I was bumped into a member of Congress the other day, and they said, "I guarantee you, we will have a tax bill done before Christmas." I said, all right, good. That's good. That's good news. That's good news. But I think and it's easy to focus on the negative and to focus on the media. The media is all focusing on Congress. Oh, they're not getting stuff done, et cetera, et cetera. But I was talking to another member of Congress a couple of weeks back, and they were telling me, and this really encouraged me. All right, it doesn't grab headlines, but the president appointed people to lead all these various departments of federal government. And those guys, those men and women, are the president gave them instructions, do X, Y, and Z, repeal these regulations, do this, that, and the other. And that is happening because it doesn't need approval from the media. We don't really care what Hollywood thinks about it. The president set forward an agenda to do those things, and they're getting done. And I think the evidence of that is look at the stock market. Those folks pay attention to what's really going on behind the scenes, to regulations that are being rolled back or being halted, and all those, and creating a more business-friendly environment, which the president promised. And so I think you're seeing that. The evidence of that, of course, is what you see in Wall Street, what you see in the economy, and which is improving. We've got a lot of work to do, but it's improving. So to me, I kind of take heart at that. Good stuff is happening. And sometimes it's great to turn off, put down the phone, not look at Twitter, don't listen to talk radio, and just look at what's really happening. And you find that a lot of good stuff is happening. And so I think we've got to, those are kind of things I think that we as Republican Party can rally around. We can take back to the American people. If we can get a couple key legislative victories in Congress, there's things we can rally around and say, all right, we're pushing forward the agenda that we said we would, that's pro-growth, that's creating opportunity for people in America, and that is doing the conservative things that we promised we would do. And so I hope that we continue that, and I hope that we can come together as a party and focus on important things, the key concepts, the important things of conservatism that we all share, of limited government, of opportunity, of growth. And those are, to me, that's the answer to all the negativity that you see, is to get out there and talk about important things. And that's what I'm trying to do as I run for Secretary of State, talk about important things. And to me, it revolves around a couple of things. It revolves around faith, revolves around community, and revolves around opportunity. Excuse me. I thought it was over this cold, but not quite. So, honestly, faith is where it starts for me. I'm a Christian. You may be, you not be, but I'm a Christian, and so that kind of colors my worldview. I look at how I look at things and how we treat people. The Lord gives us a whole lot of instructions on how we should treat people. We should love our neighbors, we love ourselves, and really, to me, the whole Christian faith revolves around love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So how we treat people, I think, unfortunately, we see people hop on Twitter or Facebook, and we don't always treat ourselves as neighbors, or as we want to be treated, or as we should love our neighbors as we love ourselves. So, I try to always be a happy warrior, but a happy warrior, and encourage people to do good things, and I hope that I can always do that. But the other big thing that I want to talk to you about tonight, and I'd love to take some questions from you, is community. And to me, where the Secretary of State can have an impact on that is in the elections process. The elections are where we as voters express our will and how we want the government run, where we hold our elected officials' feet to the fire. And we've kind of seen over the last few years an assault on that, on elections, on free and fair elections. And it's become kind of a war to try to rig the election in one group's favor or another, rather than make it fair to all. And I think the challenge that the Secretary of State has, you look at Brian Kemp, that poor guy gets sued every other day by somebody. And really, most of the lawsuits are trying to rig the elections to favor, in this case, the Democratic Party. So we have to stand against that. We had a special election, as you all know, in the 6th Congressional District. Karen Handel won, thankfully. But there were numerous attempts through lawsuits to try to stack the deck and rig the election. And they weren't trying to do it because they were trying to help Karen Handel. They were trying to help the Democrat win. And so we have to fight that tooth and nail. We have to send the message as Republicans. We don't believe that we need to have the election rigged to win, because we believe we have the best ideas. We just want it fair. We want everybody, every citizen, to have equal access to the polls. And we think we're happy to compete on the field of ideas because we think we have the best ideas and we're going to put forward the best candidates. So that's the kind of message I want to send as Secretary of State. The elections are going to be fair for everybody. I'll stand up against any group that tries to rig the elections one way or the other, even if it's a Republican group that's trying to rig the elections. No, we're going to be fair. And I think that's crucially important. Now, one quick thing I'll say, the voting machines that we have are getting old. And most of them were purchased in the early 2000s. They've kind of reached their end. As I go around the state and talk to elections officials, I think the challenge that they're facing is some counties are literally buying used machines off eBay for the parts to scavenge them so they can keep enough machines up and running to conduct an election. And we're going to reach a critical mass with that. We're going to have to buy a new machine. We're just going to have to. And the technology has changed quite a bit in 10 years, 12 years. So what I want to see, and I'm very soon I'm going to be laying out a very detailed plan about how I think we should go about this. There's a lot of distrust in our election system right now. There was a YouGov poll about 2 months ago said that 59% of Democrats are convinced, they're not just convinced that the Russians tried to influence the election. They are convinced that Russians literally hacked machines and changed votes for Donald Trump. Yeah. And there are 53% of Republicans and another 38% of Democrats who are convinced that there are millions of people who voted in the presidential election illegally. Now, we've got investigations going on to determine, the president has a commission to look into voting, whether people have voted illegally or not. My concern about all of that is this. It's moving beyond no longer people are saying, well, I'm disappointed that my candidate didn't win. People are looking and saying, the winner of the election got there fraudulently. It was stolen, either through illegal votes or through Russian hacking or whatever. And I think that's a problem. That's a problem for our republic. Because if we can't trust that we had a fair election and that the right person won, if no matter who wins, large chunks of the population are going to suspect that foul play was involved, then we're not going to trust the process, right? So when the winner, as your city councilman or something, stands up and proposes something, you're going to say, well, that guy's illegitimate anyway because he stole the election. And that creates a huge problem, I think. And I think that's some of what you're seeing. Why is the left so agitated all the time? They are convinced that the Russians stole the election and handed it to Donald Trump. And if you really thought that, you'd be pretty upset too. But this makes it crucially important, I think, as we face this situation in Georgia where we're going to have to buy new machines. We have to have an open and transparent process. I firmly believe that our next machines must have a paper backup where that you as a voter can know that we're not just trusting a computer. Because the truth of the matter is, no matter what voting machine you have, it can be hacked. It just can. So you have to build security processes around that to make sure that doesn't happen. And one of those security processes, two aspects to that. One, I think you have to have paper so that people can see here's an actual printed vote, and it matches what the computer says. But also, there are several states, and I'll be talking more about this in the days to come, there are several states that do post-election quality assurance checks. I worked in manufacturing for a long time. What we would do is we would set up the specifications of what we wanted the part to look like on the front end. We'd manufacture it, and then we would pull random samples and we would measure them to see, do the parts we produced match what we want to? And if they didn't, you had a big problem. And if they did, okay, we can move forward. So there are a couple states that do this. They pull random ballots, a statistically significant number of ballots, randomized, and they look to see that this ballot, was it counted correctly? And if they were, then we have a fair election and we know the results are verified. And I think that's a process that we need to incorporate here in Georgia to give voters an added faith that their vote counted and that their voice was heard through the election. And I think this is the process we need to have as we move forward and select new voting machines. We've got to have this process and restore trust in the elections process. The last thing I'll talk about, and I'll be happy to take some questions, is really opportunity. And we as conservatives, we trust the free market. But the free market systems over the last 40 years, worldwide poverty has been cut in half because countries have been adopting free market principles. And this is lifting people out of poverty. And so we have to protect that and cherish that here in the United States. And we have a number of professions in Georgia that require a professional license. And that these are, the purpose of a professional license is to protect the public from harm and fraud. You want to make sure that the person building your house knows how to build a house, and that when after you buy it, it's not going to collapse on you, right? So you have to have some standards. And the Secretary of State's office oversees many of the professional licensing boards that exist in Georgia. But, all right, good. We've seen a trend, I've seen a trend since I've been in the legislature, of a desire to license new professions. I voted against them because I didn't think those particular professions needed to be licensed. Music therapist. I don't really know that we need a professional licensing board and a bunch of regulations for music therapy. That's just me. So I voted against that bill. There were a couple others. This past session, we passed a bill to regulate a salesman who sells durable medical devices. I didn't really see why we needed to license that profession. So we've seen this trend of wanting to license more professions, and then even in professions that already have licenses, to kind of make it harder and harder for people to get a license in the first place for those professions. And this runs contrary to what we believe as conservatives and as Republicans. And who does it hurt the most? It hurts lower income people who are struggling to try to provide for their family. If you make it harder to get a professional license, those are the people you're hurting. And so we need to fight against this. And we have an entity in state government that is already created to deal with this. It's called and you'll love this, it's called the Georgia Occupational Regulation Review Council. Only government could come up with a name like that, right? But this panel, the Secretary of State is one of the members, and other existing officers in the state government, and it is empowered to do a couple of things. And one of them is, periodically, it's supposed to review each professional license and determine whether we need to continue to license that profession, or do we have the right amount of regulation on it? Do we have too much? Do we have too little? Do we have the right amount of regulation on that professional license? And so I called them up and I said, hey, where can I find those reports of those periodic reviews? And they said, well, we don't do them. I said, what do you mean? The law says I'm looking at the law right here. The law says you're supposed to do it. And they said, well, the legislature required us to do zero-based budgeting, so we decided that we don't have the money to do that. I said, well, have you requested the money? Have you talked to the governor's office to request the money that you need? No. How much money do you need? We don't know. So that's unacceptable. So I dropped a resolution, House Resolution 744, that's pending in the legislature right now, and I'm going to push it hard next legislative session, either to shame them or into doing their job, or get them the money they need to do their job. But that's crucially important. I can promise, the Secretary of State is one of the members of that board, as I mentioned. So I can promise you, if I'm Secretary of State, that review council is going to do those periodic reviews, and we're going to work with each licensing board and make sure that we are licensing these things properly. And some of them I don't know need to be licensed. Librarians. I've talked to members of the library board. Basically, all the library board does is look and say, yes, this person who wants to be a librarian has the proper educational requirements, and then hand them a license. Do we really need a board for that draws per diems and it builds up a bureaucracy around it? No, we don't. There's other ways to handle that. And so those are the kind of things that we need to explore. And this really has, as I mentioned, really has all to do about jobs. We want people to have opportunity. That's what we're the Republican Party. We're conservatives. We're about opportunity so that people can earn an honest living and provide for their families themselves, so that the government doesn't have to try to provide a income for them. People want to work and earn dignity themselves, and that's what we as Republicans stand for. So the last thing I'll tell you, and then I'll be happy to take some questions, is one of my favorite movies is the movie Braveheart, if y'all remember that from a few years back. And there's a great scene in there that I think kind of describes our political moment right now. And William Wallace looks at the Scottish nobles and he says to them, you think that the people exist to provide you with a position. But I think your position exists to provide people with freedom. And really, in reality, secretary, when it boils down to it, secretary, whether it's Secretary of State or state representative or governor or mayor or city council, those positions were created by our Constitution really to protect your freedom. And in this age of cynicism, when folks are so cynical about government, I think a lot of it has to do with people that have looked at politicians and said, that guy thinks that I exist to provide him with a position so that he can get treated to fancy dinners and go get wined and dined and get special perks on the side. When in reality, that position is there to protect your freedom. And so I can promise you, if I'm Secretary of State, I'm going to wake up every day and I'm going to keep that in my mind. And I'm going to remember that my number one job as Secretary of State is to protect your freedom, to protect the sanctity of our elections, to make sure that every citizen in this state has the opportunity to get a professional license or to start their own business. And so that's what I'm about, and that's what I'm going to do. I would love to have your vote. We've got some literature here. I've got a few bumper stickers, and I'm very easy to find. I'm on Twitter at Buzz Brockway, at Facebook at Vote for Buzz. My website is voteforbuzz.com. I've even got a LinkedIn profile, which I'm not really sure what to do with, but it's there. So thank you very much again for your time, and I would love to answer any questions about anything you want to talk about, politics, or we can talk about the Falcons. And Ezekiel Elliott's not going to be in the game Saturday, Sunday. So yes, ma'am.
Do you think that some of the groups will try to challenge the voter ID again?
Yeah, absolutely will. And listen, I was working on a bill this past session to require that people, when they fill out an application for an absentee ballot, to put their driver's license number on it. There's a couple of states that do that. And I thought, well, this would be a good way to kind of sort of extend photo ID to absentee balloting. And I got the bill drafted, and I started talking to some people, and somebody said, you ought to go talk to the Attorney General's office, because they're the ones who, there's a gentleman who works in the Attorney General's office who was there, who successfully defended all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court our voter ID system. And so I called him up, and he said, well, please don't introduce that bill. I said, why not? This will close the loophole. And he said, here's the problem. When we, as a state of Georgia, got approval for our voter ID system, one of the things we said was, well, if somebody doesn't have an ID, they can get a free one from the state of Georgia. But if they don't get one of those, they can vote absentee. And we have several security things in place already on absentee voting to make sure that people don't do that. So if he was worried and the climate has changed, there are other states that have tried to implement voter ID and has been successfully challenged in court and tossed out. So he was worried that if I introduced that bill and it passed and got signed into law, that it could put our entire voter ID system in jeopardy. So I didn't drop the bill. And I think protecting that is crucially important. There are two main ways to prevent fraud in elections. The first one is keeping a clean voter list. You have to constantly update that. There are procedures that we go through as a state and your local elections officials go through. One of the bills I helped get passed allowed local elections officials to look through the obituaries. And that sounds kind of morbid, but listen, when you're an elections official, when one of your loved ones passes away, the last thing you're thinking is, oh, I need to call the Board of Elections and have them remove the voter list. But allowing a local elections officials to look through the obituaries, and they can start the process of removing somebody who's deceased and somebody didn't slip in and vote for them. But you have to keep the voter list clean. But the second key component of that is voter ID. We have to know that the person that shows up at the polls is who they say they are. And look, despite what you read in the media, voter ID has strong bipartisan support among the people. Not among the Democratic politicians, unfortunately. But you talk to average Democrats, it's like, yeah, we don't want our votes stolen. Of course not. Voter ID is fine. So it still enjoys broad bipartisan support among the people. So yeah, we've got to defend that tooth and nail.
But we have to show an ID when we go to the doctor now. I mean, for God's sakes, I
Sure.
mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I don't see anything wrong with.
And listen, when Karen Handel was Secretary of State, she had a bus, and it would ride around and say, if anybody wants a free state-issued ID that you can use for voting, we'll be at this park on such and such a date and time. And if we need to do that again, let's do it again. But almost everybody has a driver's license, and those that don't, the state provides them a free ID. And if we need to travel around to every nursing home in Georgia with this bus, then let's do it and make sure that everybody has an ID.
That's one of the problems we have, though. The nursing homes themselves will send in for absentee ballots.
Yeah.
For all the people, and then they help them vote them. So whoever, I think that,
Yeah.
you know, that they're, anyway, I get all bent out of shape on that one because.
No, it's offensive. Look, it offends me that somebody would try to steal somebody else's vote.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're about, and we need to. I don't think that fraud is widespread, but when you have a tight race, when the race is very close, you know, where 10, 15 votes can matter sometimes. I was part of an election. I helped a gentleman get elected to the state house in Snellville, up where I live. He won by 27 votes, and we loved all 27 of those folks, hugged their necks. but you know, if you had 50 votes that were questionable, that could swing that election. Now, most elections are decided by, the margin is not that close. But this is why I know the media kind of, they mentioned my little, that fun little ad we did with zombies. The zombie trying to register to vote. And said, no, undead is still dead. You can't register to vote. And one of the TV stations in Atlanta kind of dinged me on it. Said that, well, voter fraud is not really that big a deal. But it really is. And we have to be vigilant. If we're not vigilant, then voter fraud will creep in. So we have to be vigilant every day. Yes, sir.
I have good news for you, Buzz.
Great.
And that is, not a single Russian contacted me and tried to influence my
Good. Me either. So
I sat with I don't know if you know what a Romeo Club is, retired old men eating out.
Yes, sir.
And I told every one of those retired old men and asked them if any Russians contacted them and asked them to change their vote. And it's more good news, Buzz.
Didn't happen. Yeah.
Didn't happen.
I think you're seeing the investigations into the quote unquote Russian hacking and Russian. It's going to turn out to be a whole lot of nothing. Now listen, here's my theory. Putin is an old KGB agent, and I think that what he was trying to do on social media and stuff was cause Americans to distrust the outcome of the election. He didn't care if it was Trump or Hillary. He wants them to doubt and I think if that's what he was trying to do, he succeeded spectacularly on the Democratic side because they don't trust anything that happened. But they did not hack it. They did not. I was at an elections conference in Williamsburg, Virginia, and there's a Secretary of State's organization of Secretary of States all across the state, all across the country, and the person who's the chair of that right now is a Democratic Secretary of State from Connecticut. Somebody who, she stood up at this meeting and said, I don't like Donald Trump, I can't stand Donald Trump, but I can promise you, not one vote anywhere in the United States was hacked. Not one. And so it's an urban legend, unfortunately, that's causing a lot of turmoil in our politics. But what else did you have?
Two legitimate questions.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Thanks for
providing
providing some levity to us.
I'm going to give you a softball and then a fastball.
All right.
The first one is, I'd like to know about your formal education or who you're for. And then the
Which football team?
fastball- Yeah, the fastball is, what's your position on casino gambling in the state?
All right. I went to Georgia Tech.
Yay!
All right. Hey, we got some fans. All right, good. I went to Georgia Tech. And I studied management science, which is we sit around and think about how to make processes more efficient. So I confess I'm a nerd, and that's what I did professionally for a long time, was sit around how to think about how to make processes more efficient. So the football team I cheer for is Georgia Tech, but I will tell you this story. This kind of to brag on Johnny Isaacson a little bit, actually, but this I tried to learn this from him too. I was at an event. I don't have it on now, but my little badge for state rep, I have a little yellow jacket on there, and that's an interesting conversation starter at the Capitol, because there's not many of us Georgia Tech alums in the state house. But I was at this event. It was a ribbon cutting, and the lady who was introducing Johnny Isaacson was a huge Bulldog fan, and somehow I wound up at the front of the line there, and she just starts railing against Georgia Tech, just a bunch of nerds, blah, 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 blah. And this is how she's introducing our senator to people. And to show you what a class act Johnny Isaacson is, and this was a powerful lesson to me. He stepped up and he looked right at me and said, "Buzz, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Bulldog, but when I became senator, I learned every word of the Ramblin' Wreck." Now, I don't yet know all the words to Glory, Glory, Georgia, but I'm trying, because it's fun to give each other a hard time in the football field, but we're really blessed in this state. With Tech in Georgia, we have two of the finest public institutions in the.
There's a third one,
All right.
Georgia Southern.
Georgia Southern is an excellent school as well. It is, yes, sir.
There's another one over in Tuscaloosa too.
Now you're just trying to get me in trouble. And you got your Bear Bryant hat there too, so yeah.
Let me tell you how you handle this situation. I've
Yes.
had to learn too how to do it, because I'm a Bulldog from the word go. But my daughter-in-law's father and brother are Tech graduates, and they're big Tech fans. I mean, season tickets and all this stuff. And so what I promised is I won't say anything bad about Tech unless they're playing Georgia. and so he agreed that he wouldn't say anything bad. So I pull for Tech when they're not playing Georgia. So that's what you have to do.
Now, to answer your fastball question, I'm sorry, I can't vote for casino gambling, and I just worry. As I mentioned, I'm a nerd, so I sit around reading studies and things like that, and I think what you've seen in other states is several things that really concern me about casino gambling. There's several studies that show what you end up with is an increase in personal bankruptcies in a radius around the casino. And then that leads to broken families, which then leads to, in some states, you've seen as high as for every $1 that you raise in taxes on a casino, you have to spend an additional $2 in public services. And I think that's directly related to somebody who lives in the area, swings by on their way home every night and gambles away their paycheck, which leads to bankruptcy, which leads to divorce, which leads to broken families, which leads to increased spending in social services. And so I don't buy into it's a wonderful thing for economic development. The libertarian streak in me wants to say if people want to blow their money gambling, fine. But I don't think I could go for that. So
Well, there's
Thank you
too
for
many
the question.
places close by where they can go, not Georgia.
one of the first emails I got about it was a constituent of mine, and he said, "I go gambling several times a year. Don't you ever vote to bring those things in Georgia?"
That's what I was saying. I love gambling. Get me on a cruise ship, and boy,
That's great for
all
other
I
states,
do.
but not ours.
But I don't want it in my backyard.
And I think, unfortunately, what you've seen is An article I read a few months ago in the state of New Jersey. Of course, they've had to bail out. Atlantic City has had to bail out hundreds of millions of dollars. But there's this crazy law in New Jersey where where the casino in certain situations didn't have to pay out the winnings. And so this guy had sued the casino, and they said, well, the state law says we don't have to pay you. And what had happened was the amount of money that they throw into elections to candidates, to elected officials through campaign contributions, that gives them tremendous sway over laws. So here you are in there gambling, and when you're lucky enough to win, they don't necessarily have to pay you your winnings. So why in the world would you? I mean, it just.
I'd be in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indian Casino in Atmore, Alabama. A man from my county where I grew up in Alabama went down there and hit $1 million jackpot. They locked him in a room down there for 24 hours and claimed the machine was broken. He sued him, and since it was Indian owned, they had certain laws that the Alabama law and federal law could not touch.
Yeah.
He did not get his winnings.
You know that old saying, the house always wins? It's true. Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
There are a couple of licensing boards that need some major overhaul. One of them is for low voltage license. The test is very hard for the person who just works on low voltage, because they want to know what about payroll taxes and unemployment and all this. These guys work out in the field.
Right.
There's somebody else that does all that. And that's totally ridiculous. I think the last time I talked to somebody, there was 8 questions concerning low voltage.
Yeah.
And I actually knew the answer to all 8 of those, okay? I mean, so, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I think there's some where we need to review things like that. I think there's other boards where we need to maybe need to be separated. I hear complaints from cosmetologists,
Yeah.
that there are folks who want to, it's a very broad industry. There's a lot of different things you can do in that industry, and the test is sort of catch-all, where we don't. The folks who want to be in this one aspect of this profession but have no knowledge or no interest in knowing this other one, why do they have to go get that education too?
Well, another.
So there's a lot of reforms we can do.
I'm on the podiatry board. I'm the consumer member, and of course I'm not a doctor.
Well, thank you
so
for
yeah, I'm the consumer member.
Thank you for doing that.
And we have things that will come to us about that actually pertains to cosmetology, about what kind of things do they eat, like, because I like a good pedicure with a razor, I'm sorry, but that's been outlawed. But, things like that will come, because that is in the realm of the podiatrist thing,
And I think the way I would approach all this is, obviously I mentioned through the GORC, the Regulatory Review Council, but I think we need to look at what do other states do? What's the common practice in these industries? And that's what we need to do here in Georgia. But also, one of the key things is that in my time in the legislature, one thing that I've really found is that trust and relationships are kind of the lifeblood of politics. If you want to get anything done in politics, people need to trust you, that your word is your bond, and they need to have relationships with people. And so I think how I would approach all these licensing boards is develop a relationship. And I'm already starting now. I'm glad to meet you, and I would love for you any experiences that you've had on the podiatry board. I'd love to hear them, because I want to understand and develop a relationship with the folks in that industry. And what do they need? What do they need out of the licensing board? What can the Secretary of State do, what the office do to help the podiatry board do its job better, to help podiatrists get back to work and be out there serving the public?
Well, one of the things is we've been over-regulating some of the things they need to forget. They're stupid. I mean, petty things, but we got a doctor on that board God love him, but he wants to regulate everything and everybody. And it's really, that's when you want to just get up and walk
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's that temptation always to, you know, we have enough podiatrists in this state, we don't need any more, so let's make it really tough for anybody else to get in that business, because that way we make more money. We have to resist that urge in every industry. So it'll be hard work, and you know, Secretary Kemp, I think he's done a pretty good job. He's tried to tackle some things, and you know, ran into some buzzsaws in various industries, but his heart was in the right place, and we need to continue that and continue that effort to make sure that you know, I want to make sure that Georgia has the best election system in the world and is the easiest place to do business in the world. We're very proud that we are judged as the best state to do business in, but what the Secretary of State can do is help make this the easiest state to do business in, for people to start their business, get a professional license, and that's really what the job of Secretary of State is. So, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I appreciate you letting me come down and talk to you.